Hi, welcome to another episode of Django Chats, weekly podcast on the Django web framework. I'm Carlton Gibson, joined as ever by Will Vincent. Hello, Will, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, Carlton.
Hello. And this week we have Sage Abdullah with us from Jakarta in Indonesia. And Sage was a Google Summer of Code student in 2019, and he's been responsible for the CrossDB JSON field that we're hoping to land into 3.1, Django 3.1. Hi, Sage, how are you?
Great. How about you?
You're marvelous. Thank you for joining us. So we just wanted to have a chat with you and find out about yourself and about what how you got into programming and about the work you did for Google Summer of Code on Django and your experience there and all the rest. So one thing we quite often start with is just how about you tell us about your background and how you got into programming and perhaps how you found Django.
I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm in my third year as a computer science student at Universitas Indonesia. And as Carlton said, I was a participant in Google Summer of Code 2019 with Django, during which I implemented a CrossDB JSON Field. How I got into programming, I think I first started coding. I think I first started coding in the 7th grade. I believe it was Java, but I didn't get past basic input output. Though
that's my experience with Java as well.
Yeah. I was about to say like that's everyone's experience with Java, no?
Yeah, I remember the book jumped straight to GUI after the Hello World console. I think I don't know what book that was. I don't remember. But I didn't continue after that. And in my 9th grade, I learned HTML and CSS as everyone. And I was already familiar with XML in my 6th grade. I used to mod my Sony Ericsson phone back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Just hacking some stuff, the layouts and stuff. And then I continued to the JavaScript course, but it hurt my brain at the time. I think it still does, actually, with the modern JavaScript stuff.
It's not Python for sure.
Yeah, it's not Python for sure. And then in high school, in the 10th grade and the 11th grade, I learned Pascal to prepare for the National Science Olympiad in Informatics. Problem sets used Pascal mostly. I know it's quite ancient, but yeah, that's what we use.
Yeah, no, that's kind of cool because I know people who know Pascal, but they're all quite a lot older.
Yeah. So I learned Pascal for the National Olympiad in Informatics. It's basically discrete maths and competitive programming. So I learned a bit of C and C++, though I have forgotten a lot about that. And I only got through the provincial level, while the national winners, they will be delegates for IOI, the International Olympiad in Informatics. Yeah, but I didn't get past that.
Yeah.
I only got through the provincial level. So for Python, it's quite a long story, but it's quite relevant to my GSOC experience. So if you don't mind.
Yeah, we've got time. We want to hear.
Yeah. Okay. So in my 12th grade, the final year of high school, there was this competition by Wikimedia Indonesia called Besut Code. Code is Indonesian for code. It's an open source software development competition for high school and university students to help prepare them for Google Code and Google Summer of Code. So it's basically a mini fight. It's like a mini version of GCI and GSOC for students. It's divided into for high school and university students.
Okay.
During the competition, we were mentored by John Vandenberg. I don't know if you've heard that name. He's from Wikimedia Australia. He's currently a maintainer at Koala, the code formatter.
Okay.
Koala, haven't heard of it?
No.
Okay, so
there's a lot we haven't heard of though. So
yeah, there's so many things.
Somebody suggested using Koala instead of Black in the mailing list. I think I remember reading that.
Oh, I missed that. I missed that. There were so many suggestions.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so for the competition, we used GitHub Classroom, and so how the competition worked, basically, we forked public repos into our private ones, and then we fixed some bugs and code style issues there. And once our mentor approved our fixes, we could send PRs to the real repository.
Okay, that's kind of cool.
That's fantastic.
That's kind of nice. That's like a sort of sandbox where you can...
Yeah. I think our mentor was kind of afraid of, letting the kids out there. We were basically under we were minors, so he didn't want us to communicate directly unless we actually have some real work.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so during the competition, I learned how to use linters and CI services to integrate them. And one of the repos I worked on was the Media Wiki parser from hell. It's the name. You can look it up on GitHub, and it's built on Python. But during that time, I didn't know Python at all. And I mean, I could make sense of things. I could read the code, but fixing the code style was quite tricky because I didn't know if what I'm fixing does not break anything.
Yeah, right, okay.
So yeah, that was my first experience with Python. But ever since then,
Can I ask
I
you,
didn't learn Python.
Can I ask at that point?
Sure.
So you've mentioned Java, you've mentioned Pascal, you've mentioned C, you've mentioned C++, right? And then so you come to Python, and one of the things, people sometimes use it in textbooks, and they say the reason why you're using Python in this textbook is not because you have to do this in Python, but because if you know any other programming language, you can read Python. You may not know every details, but it will make sense to you. And from those kind of much harder languages, like they're much more pernickety, I think. Yeah. Like, was it not like, how was that first learning experience? That first okay, I see,
Okay, so reading Python code was actually pretty easy, but I didn't have time to actually learn Python at that time. Right. So it wasn't until my first semester at university in which we actually used Python. And coming from Pascal and Java, Python is it's a breeze, really. It's so much easier to learn, and I don't know, it was such a relief. I mean, so before I got into university, I was actually not really sure if I want to go into the computer science path because of my experience with Pascal and Java, and I was like, no, it's not a very good experience. I mean, it's not very easy,
Yeah.
But when I actually learned Python, I was like, oh, I didn't know things could be so much easier. I mean, like sorting and stuff,
But you got through it. I mean, because I learned how to code when I was quite a bit older than you are now, and Python was my first true programming languages, and then later I filled in a bit of Java and C. And in comparison, I was just like, what am I doing? Like, why would I ever, as hard as it is to learn Python, there to go the other way, I'm just like, no, I'm not going to learn ancient Greek. It's like what Carlton spends his time on. So I'm always impressed that people can get through and in the United States as well, there's still quite a bit that at the high school level, if they have anything, which most don't, it's in Java, I believe is what the AP exam, that's like the advanced placement. So yeah, I'm impressed anyone can get through those other languages. They don't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and the thing I love about Python is that with the things I learned in the first semester, I could actually build some pretty cool stuff that's actually useful in real life. In a short time, I built a chatbot on Line. It's an IM app we use. It's by Never, if you've heard about it, but I think it's not widely used outside Asia. But anyway, I basically built something like an IRC chatbot using Python, and it was really cool because I was only in my first semester, and seeing that I can actually build some stuff that is actually useful is really good.
Yeah, I think that's what it's all about. Like in my books and tutorials, I generally try to get people to build something and then kind of backfill all the information rather than making them do it the hard way, because most people aren't programming for the sake of programming. You're programming because you want to build stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you learn how to build like an IRC? I mean, how much mentoring did you have? Because that's something that it's easy to say, but like was there a person or a class that taught you how to do that? Did you Google around? What was that process like as a beginner?
Okay, so what I built was a chatbot. I mean, you can use like slash something. I mean, I can connect my code with APIs like a weather API, and then I can just slash weather Jakarta, and then I would get the output. I mean, if we are, I mean, in university, we are only taught about like string processing and using conditionals and loops, but I take it a step further by utilizing packages on PyPy. I've with my experience during the competition in high school, the Visit Code competition, I learned how to use pip and stuff. So from there, it's basically just pip install something. And yeah, I can just I can connect to some web APIs using requests and just get some data. And then once I've got the string that I want to send to users, I just hook it up with the line API. Basically it's if you've heard about Telegram, just imagine a Telegram bot. Yeah, just like that. I mean, it's not very hard if you have experience. I mean, it's not about experience. It's more about the fact that you want to read, that you're not lazy to read the docs, I think. And just Google around.
Well, I'm impressed that you came into university at that point where you knew that you didn't have to write everything yourself, that there are these packages, that it's the superpower of any language, but especially Python. Because I think that is when because I deal with beginners, when they're just starting out, they think they have to write everything themselves. And there's no sense of, it's almost like I make the analogy of shopping at a grocery store. Like you can just pull things off the shelf that way smarter people have built, like Django, and you can just use it and you don't have to understand all of it yourself. You just need a teeny bit of understanding. But getting to that point, that's what I'm, as a teacher, always interested in, because I think on some level you just have to build a bunch of stuff to understand that requests exist, that you don't have to do everything from scratch. And then because beginners will hear, I prototyped something in a weekend, and they think, well, how is that possible? But you pull down 3 packages from PyPI, and the actual code you had to write isn't that much, but it's a leap for people to get there. So that's great that you were at that point.
Yeah, that's actually what makes me love Python, because back in high school I was using Pascal, and even to implement a sorting method, I didn't know that there are also libraries. I believe there should be a library for Pascal as well, right? But since I was learning programming for competition, it was more about implementing the algorithm that is actually already built in most programming languages by now.
Yes.
Programming felt hard in high school for me, because it wasn't about building stuff, but it's more like designing the algorithm, and that's way harder.
Yeah, I think they teach programming completely backwards. Everyone does, but they make you do all that hard foundational stuff first with no context, and then in practice, you rarely use it. And the times at which you would need to use it is when you're at Google or something and you're well into your career and you have huge challenges. And so people think that programming is discrete math and memorizing, and it's really more playing and sandboxing. I think. I don't know, Carlton, what
But
would you say?
I do believe that it's important though. I mean, to learn all
Yes,
that
at some
stuff,
point.
it's still important. But
Yeah.
if you're learning, if you're starting to learn programming, it can be intimidating, I guess.
I mean, so you're doing computer science, and so you have to do all that, right? You have to go through the algorithms course and implement.
In my third semester.
Yeah, you implement all these things, but in Python now.
So in my second and third semester, we use Java for the object-oriented programming stuff,
yeah.
and that data structures and algorithms we use Java. But in the third semester, we learn web design and programming. We use Python, and that's actually how I got into Django. As we use Django.
Right. Okay.
That's fantastic because many. I would say most universities in the United States don't teach web development as part of the core curriculum. So they just don't teach it. If they do, it's an elective where there's really no resources. And so that's fantastic. But I think it's, the web is pretty important. I think it should be part of the curriculum, but it really isn't in most American programs that I'm aware of. So that's good. So did they do Flask, or did they just jump right to Django for your course?
Okay. They just jump right into Django, but since 2019, I think since last year, Flask is being taught in the first semester near the end of the semester as a final project. The students are asked to write a simple web app using Flask.
So I have so many questions about Google Summer of Code because I don't know much about it, and I suspect most listeners don't either, though. You just went through it, Carlton. You've been mentoring it for quite a while.
Well, no.
So what is
last year was my first year.
No?
I
thought you've been doing it for a while.
No. Like last, February before last, Tim Graham put an email on going, well, are we going to do Google Summer of Code? And I was like, and lots of people, prospective students said, well, yeah, come on, we want to apply, we want to do it. So, okay, I put in the application. It was my first year going through it. It was a bit like this year. I've had a bit more warning, so I was sort of mentally ready for it to come up. But yeah, it was like, oh, okay, let's put in the application. Let's review the applications. Let's get it going.
From the mentor side, how many applications come in? What's that process
we had
like? And then Sage, I want to ask you, because you wrote a fantastic proposal, but what it was like on your end, because the deadline's coming up for this year. I think it's March 31st.
Yeah. So it's the end of this week, really. But so we had like about, 50 or 60 people put in applications, of which we had mentoring capacity for 2. And because that's our biggest issue is mentors, because the code base is quite mature and there aren't that many people that know it super well, and those people need to be available and have time. And so we could take on more applicants, but we just can't. So
and it was you, Marius, Adam Johnson, and there was a fourth.
Yeah. Raphael. We just helped out. But yeah, so that's our issue. And so this year I'm going to put an email on the list this week saying, come on, we've got some good projects, we've got some good proposals coming in. Have we got the mentors to be able to? And
the Django developers list, you're going to put that on.
And depending on how many responses we get for that, and how many, because I can help. Guide a student, but the depths of the migration framework, for instance, I need Marcus or I need Simon to have the time and the capacity to do it. And if they can't, then we can't take on that project. That's just the reality of it.
So was there, and again, I apologize, I'm so ignorant, but were there 2 students last year, or is it just Sage?
Yeah, so Path as well. Path Patel did one on a form sets, stuff on form sets.
Oh, okay, we'll link to that. So Sage, what was the process like on your end? We've linked to your proposal, but what was and I think you mentioned this in the proposal, but why cross database JSON field? What made you think of that for Django?
Oh, okay. So it wasn't actually my idea. I think Carlton, did you write it? I mean, I believe it was in the mailing list. I read about it, the discussion with Tim and some other folks. But so in Google Summer of Code, the organizations also provide a list of ideas that students can they can either pick one of those ideas or they can create their own idea and submit a proposal for that. But in Django's list of ideas for GSOC 2019, the top of that list was the CrossDB JSON field. Though I'm not sure if that was actually sorted by priority or something, but
Right,
yeah,
right. What the
I
sorting
don't
was,
know.
but
So personally, in my experience, so during my web design and programming course in the third semester, I came across the need of a JSON field to store some small data for the user to be fetched by JavaScript. And it wasn't worth it to store it into the model. And I just want something quick that can be loaded by JavaScript. And I thought that something like a JSON field would do the job. And I looked it up. It turns out that Django has it, but it's only for Postgres.
right. And this is the case for a number of features like
Yeah,
search and a whole bunch of other ones. Postgres has
in the
more support than the other
concept.postgres
databases.
module. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I was actually using Postgres, but okay, so let me just explain a bit. In the course, we were required to deploy our apps to Heroku. I think it didn't have to be Heroku, but it was recommended because it was easy just to set up a small app, and so that the teachers and the grading team can can assess the web app. And we use GitLab and deploy our web app from there to Heroku. On Heroku, we use Postgres because it's not possible to use SQLite, as Heroku has this ephemeral storage that basically gets rewritten if you deploy your app. And so not the only, but the recommended option was to use Heroku Postgres. So it was technically possible for me to use the JSON field on Heroku, but I use SQLite on my local laptop, and I hadn't learned about databases at that point, and I only know that you can store data in it, but I haven't installed Postgres on my machine, so I just wanted something that can work on both SQLite and Postgres. So seeing that there's no such option unless I use something from third-party packages, like there are tons of, well, not tons, but there are some JSON field packages out there. But I think it didn't worth the effort because I just wanted something quick. So what I did was I use a text field and then basically just JSON dumps and JSON loads to it using the built-in Python library to serialize Python dictionaries into JSON strings. That's what I did. But so that was in my third semester. It was until December. And then I have been thinking about joining Google Summer of Code Actually, I have heard about Google Summer of Code since in high school during the competition with Wikimedia. So I was already aiming to participate in Google Summer of Code because, so I've also participated in Google Code, and it's basically the high school version of Google Summer of Code. And I was in my final year as a high school student, and there was a lot of exams and tryouts. So I didn't have time to fully commit into Google Code and I didn't win the grand prize. And so I was like, well, there's still Google Summer of Code. I have to join it when I got into university. So in my first year, I actually signed up on the Google Summer of Code website, but I didn't write a proposal because I didn't know what organization and what project I could work on because I was only in my second semester. I only learned about I just learned about object-oriented programming during that time. It was the first time for me, and I don't think I have the knowledge to participate in GSOC during my first year. So I didn't submit a proposal. I just wait for the next year. And then the next year, after finishing my third semester and entering my fourth, I read about the JSONField idea on the mailing list of Django. Okay, so I think I actually read about it in the. I think Carlton has put up the GSOC list of ideas way before that, and I read that page when it was still under development. It was, I think, some of the. What does the Django Wiki uses? Is it Markdown?
Yeah, it's not Markdown. It's I don't know. There's probably some technical name for it, but it's this weird wiki high syntax thing, which I'm terrible at.
Yeah.
It always takes me like 10 minutes to type it up, and then like 3 hours getting the formatting exactly correct. Not because it's particularly hard, just because I don't know it.
Yeah, I saw that there were still syntax errors, so that the formatting didn't show up properly, and I was like, well.
You must have been the first one there, though. You must
probably,
have been the first one
there, because I was. I wanted to participate in Google Summer of Code so bad, but I didn't know what project I should work on. And after taking the web design and programming and used Django, I loved it, and I feel like maybe I can contribute. So I've been reading a lot of the past Google Summer of Code for Django. There wasn't much information about that. I think Django didn't accept students the previous year.
Yeah, there'd been 1 or 2 years without any students. But there's been a long history where a few students each year, and then a couple of years off, and then I think that's more to do with people power than anything else.
Yeah, so I wanted to see if any projects were selected during in the previous year, but it turned out that there wasn't any in the past 2 years, I think, and so I was skeptical at first. But when I saw that wiki page that you wrote, I read about the JSONField idea, and I was like, this is what I needed last semester. And your story is so good as well, because like to use a text field and just serialize the JSON into it, like that's what the third-party packages out there have done for years and years. Django JSONField and whatnot. It's just a text field, and it uses JSON dump and JSON load, and that's fine. And that was discussed years ago. I
the wiki on the issue tracker, and it was closed. We don't want a field that just does that. That's not good enough. That can just be in a third-party package. That's not going in the core. But then in between that, Postgres got JSONField, and then like MySQL got it, and Oracle got it, and SQLite got it. So all the supported databases had it, and so it was like, right, now this is time, and so it was perfect for Sage to come along.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. Probably. I mean, in my blog, I wrote it. It's probably destiny or something. Yeah. I mean, it just so conveniently happened, and I don't know. It's like a miracle. Almost.
So in your proposal, I'm sure this was part of why you were chosen beyond picking a good project, is you'd already submitted some patches to Django itself. I'm curious if you could just talk about, because I mean, Carlton and I spent a lot of time trying to make that easier for people. You were able to figure it out. What was that process like for you, figuring out how to submit? I think it was at least 2 patches that were merged in. What was that process like?
Okay, so I may be a bit biased because I have previously contributed to open source projects previously, and but however, I think that the most important part that if you want to contribute to open source is basically don't be lazy to read. Seriously, I mean, there's a lot of things to read, but it's actually. Some of them are actually pretty laid out that if you actually read it, you can actually contribute. But I think one of the things that may be off-putting to some people is that, yeah, it's pretty long. There's a lot of links. I mean, let's say you are reading the contributing guide, and then it says that if you want to learn more about this, you can go here, and then you read along, and then there's another link, and it may be a bit overwhelming because some people may have not be very familiar with all of the things that's put out in the guide. But
yeah,
so
it's like
I
5,000 or 6,000 words in the contributing guide, which is.
I've almost thought, Carlton, I haven't mentioned this to you, that if you like froze Django 3.0 and you had like a dummy version that people could fix a documentation ticket or something where they could, feel like they merged something even though they didn't, just to get over that hump of, this is a longer term project for me, but to get some sort of quick win instead of it's a lot of words and will Django even take it? I don't know. I mean, as you said, Sage, though, if someone hasn't contributed to open source before, it is intimidating, for sure.
Last month, there was this event by one of the Pandas maintainers, Pandas, the data science library. So Pandas has this thing called documentation sprint, in which you can contribute to their documentation. It's even small contributions like fixing a missing period in their documentation. But the thing is, I think it's easier for Pandas because the documentation is actually built into the code itself using the doc strings. And then they use a lot of tools that can analyze whether which parts of the documentation need fixing, like what rules are broken in the documentation for each functions. And for Pandas, the documentation is mostly just descriptions of functions that are available. But for Django, we have the guide type of documentation, like tutorial types, and we also have it's more, it needs more explanation. More examples of using, you can just call a function and expect what it returns, like what's in Pandas. For Django, it's a bit different. So the same approach for the document if you want to do documentation sprints for Django, it may have to use a slightly different format because of the way the Django documentation is designed. And also probably not a lot of people is familiar with RST.
Yeah, restructured text. It can be tricky. I've recently, a couple of years into fellowing, I'm just coming round to it because you can do the cross-linking between attributes and things like that, whereas Markdown doesn't have that, and I kind of like it. But yeah, there's a learning curve again. It's like another one of these markup formats you have to learn.
Yeah, but that's just for documentation, though. If you're talking about more about code contributions, I think. Okay, so before that, for the contributing guide, I think what can be improved is I saw that there is another page that is specifically for new contributors. That's a good start, but I think if we can have something like a step-by-step guide that is more, more simple, and just maybe we can have some screenshots like describing the process of, for example, forking Django and then cloning it, installing it into your virtual environment, and then creating a commit, and then until you have this screenshot of a pull request. Probably it's a bit more easy to understand because people can imagine it more easily by looking at the screenshots and seeing what is happening when you are contributing. Probably. I mean, I don't know about that.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, a couple of DjangoCon sprints I've been at where trying to get people up and running and, just working through that first tutorial is difficult.
Yeah. Also for track the tickets, I think you can improve it by adding more labels for the difficulty. So it's not just easy pickings or not, but maybe easy, medium, and hard. So, I mean, right now it's basically just either it's easy or it's not. And the not easy part is like, it can range from like really hard or not far off from easy picking actually. So, yeah.
No, there's lots of tickets which are not rocket science, but then there's some which really are.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I was telling Sage like as we discussed with Mikey Ariel about a docs fellow or someone who can come in with fresh eyes and have that perspective on all the stuff.
There's a big task. I mean, for instance, the advice to new contributors, I point people to that, but that's, in a way, that should be front and center, and it isn't. And that's a kind of information architecture problem. It's not that the content isn't there. There's a tutorial on creating your first patch where, it goes through and you do a fake ticket and you kind of, you fix a bug. And it's like, oh, okay, that would be how it worked. But that needs to be brought out so it's easy to find.
Yeah, there's also another program called Season of Docs. Did Django participate?
We applied, but it was the first season and they said they had 300 applicants and 14 places or something. So we didn't get in last year. But if it comes up again, I will apply again because I think it's a good, it's something that Django, if you look at the track, the big things on the tickets are like the ORM, the admin, and then documentation. There's lots of documentation tickets that we could fix, and there's lots of issues that perhaps we could resolve.
Also, some of my friends have asked me like how to start because they were also interested in contributing, and some of them actually are looking to apply for Google Summer of Code with Django this year, and they were having troubles with finding tickets that they can work on because it's like I said, between the easy pickings and not, we cannot really know which tickets are actually doable just by reading the description. Sometimes we have to actually know the context.
No, it is tough. Like I always say to people, look, so I try and, at the Django cons, I've tried to run a sprint and a workshop where we get people contributing. And I say, look, it's okay, so here's how you can filter and show people filtering the track. But then I say, look, find a ticket that kind of grabs your attention and then spend some time with it. And that's the difficulty, is that you do actually have to spend the time digging into the ticket and finding out what it's all about in order to work out if you can address it.
Well, we're coming up on time. Are there any projects or other things you want to talk about, Sage?
Okay. Can I have something more to say? I'm just it's just an advice for students looking to participate in Google Summer of Code, or basically not just Google Summer of Code, but more into open source in general. If you think that you cannot do it, well, the truth is I think most likely you actually can, because when I wrote my proposal for JSONField, I haven't actually learned about databases, and I had never executed an SQL statement into a DBMS terminal before. And it was actually, I was just reading the docs and just imagined how it would work, but I didn't actually know what I was doing. But thankfully, in the end it worked. So if you feel like you feel like you don't have the capacity, or you feel like your experience is not enough or something like that, it's basically just put those thoughts away and just, I don't know, believe in yourself, I guess.
I hope this podcast and your experience helps even more people apply, this year and going forward, because if there are mentors like Carlton and the others who are generous with their time, it, makes a big impact on Django, and it's a good experience for people to get into the Django contributing world who maybe wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, no, entirely. I mean, I think Google Summer of Code has been a big boom for Django over the years. A big thanks to Sage for, A, coming on, but B, your efforts putting together the CrossDB JSON Field, because that should be going to Django 3.1, and it's going to be a great tool for everybody. Like, this exact example is the one that I have in mind of using SQLite locally, just quick development. I don't have to spin up Postgres just to prototype something, and then I'm going to move on to Postgres at a later date. So it's just super. And Oracle and MySQL as well.
Yeah, great. Well, Sage, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and your work.
Yeah, thanks, Sage.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Right, that was Django Chat. Join us next time.